The Edmonton Oilers took game one out west in double overtime as the New York Rangers are set to try and get even with Florida. Plus, the NHL coaching carousel continues to turn. All that and more on today's Locked On NHL podcast.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, and welcome to the Friday edition of the Locked On NHL podcast. I am Rachel Donner from Locked On Flyers, here each and every Friday with Gil Martin from Locked On Islanders. You can find us over on YouTube or on the SiriusXM app or anywhere you listen to podcasts. Subscribe to get the latest episode as soon as it's available here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Gil, how are you doing this Friday?
I am good. I'm exhausted. I mean, double overtime
I know.
makes for a late night, but certainly an entertaining and well worth it wait.
Listen, if I'm Tyler Sagan, I don't know what I'm doing with myself today because, I do because he's a professional and he will move on and he will make it work. But after working so hard to come back into that game, I felt like he took the stars on his shoulders himself to try and make things work. Also, that double minor in overtime, my God. And Dallas, I think, did everything they could. And who would have thought that Skinner would have, and the post, to be fair.
Yes,
but
yes. Hey, part of the goalie's equipment. Part of the goalie's equipment.
Yeah, I think having Skinner make that many quality saves in such a clutch situation is not, it's not that he's a terrible goalie, but he's not that guy either.
Well, you don't have to you don't have to be that guy all the time. You have to be that guy at the right time. And he certainly was
true.
last night. He came up big, and if Edmonton goes on to win the Stanley Cup, that performance in game one will go down as one of the big reasons why they were able to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. It was so clutch. And then, of course, Connor McDavid with the goal to win it in game one. I think, that was a huge statement for Edmonton, I think, to just put that button on the game like that, because, I think that especially it being on the road for them and, having to really, I think that's the best kind of effort for them where they have to take an early lead. Like coming from behind isn't exactly their forte. And so to win game one, I think puts the Oilers in a really good position.
It does. It gives them home ice advantage for the rest of the series, unless they lose a game at home, which in this series seems very possible at some point. But
Fair.
Yeah, but you want that early advantage. And look, when you're the road team in a series, you have two games you have to play on the road. You want to split. When you get game one, you're playing with house money now in game two. That sets you up for a really, in a really good position. And psychologically, I think it also is a big boost, not just the win, but the way they got it done. I think that is going to be something that really rallies the Edmonton Oilers and gives them a jolt of confidence, at least in this series.
Yeah, I think so. Now, if you look on the Dallas side of things, they have had a lot of adversity in the playoffs so far. So I'm not exactly worried about them just after one game. For all the reasons we just talked about, it does give the Oilers that advantage. But that being said, you look at all the other previous series and Dallas had to fight for them. And I think that they have it in them. So, plenty of time and plenty of opportunity for the Dallas Stars here.
No doubt about it. And, one game is not the end of a series. You need to win four, obviously. And I think the Stars have been getting it done all year long, and they will not be dismayed by losing one game. I think they will bounce back. They'll have home ice advantage in game two. And I just see them as a very resilient group that, as you mentioned,
Yeah.
has been fighting this way all year long. The fact that nothing came easy to this team will lessen the impact for Dallas of losing game one.
Absolutely. And if you recall in that series against the Avalanche, they lost game one in overtime.
Yeah.
I think like there's precedent for this. So I am not worried for Dallas at all at this point in the series. And I'm looking forward to plenty more good games in this one. Game two is Saturday night at 8 Eastern, which is not the time zone for either of those teams. So
No.
do that accordingly. The New York Rangers are going to attempt to tie their series at one. Florida leads the series 1-0, winning that first game 3-0. And as many have said, that game didn't feel like a 3-0 game. It was much closer than that score suggested.
It was in a lot of ways, but I thought it was interesting the way that game sort of played out, where I think Florida's physicality was a big reason for the fact that they won the game 3-0. And will the Rangers be able to either answer that physicality or overcome it using skill? And which way, if you're coaching the Rangers, would you try to approach it?
Well, I think it's a mix because I think that the Rangers had a ton of scoring chances in that game, and they just needed one of them to go. So if they can get a little more physical and get those net front opportunities, get those second chances that maybe they were missing, one of those is going to go this time around. This team is too skilled to not have that happen moving forward. Like it just felt like an anomaly with this team to get shut out like that.
And when you talk about net front presence, two words immediately come to mind: Chris Kreider.
Yeah.
I mean, that is his office. That is his place where he does the most damage. And the fact that the Florida Panthers were able to keep him off the board, that is going to be one of those things you got to watch for the rest of the series. Will Chris Kreider get his goals from in close? Because if he does, that gives the Rangers a boost. If he can't, boy, that's a big edge for Florida.
So Florida's defense has been doing a tremendous job out there, and the goaltending for Florida is good, but you can get Bob to move. He is like a guy that can be beat in the right circumstances, and I think that that's really the move here for the Rangers.
Yeah, they've got to try to get him to move. And the other thing is, I think you got to try to screen him a little bit, get traffic in front of him. And again, Kreider comes to mind when you talk about that. But if Sergei Bobrovsky sees the puck, the odds are much stronger that he's going to stop it. So you got to get some traffic in front. And I think the battles in front of the Florida goal are going to be important to set up the skill players for the Rangers to actually be able to use their skill to convert and make them into goals.
Yeah, I think that's the way to go. I am not worried if I'm the New York Rangers. They have it in them. I think that, obviously this Florida team is going to be tough and they're very good on the road, as we have seen. But I do think there's room here for the New York Rangers to pull this series out. Game two for this series is tonight, and looking forward to that one. Game three will be on Sunday. So before this next week, we'll have a much better sense of where this series is going. So it'll be a fun weekend ahead for sure in the Eastern Conference Finals.
No doubt about it. And I really look at both of these series. I just see both of them going 6 or 7 games. I mean, you could talk about other teams who may have made for a juicier matchup, but I think we've got two excellent matchups here. Evenly matched teams battling to get to the Stanley Cup final. I think we're in for two very entertaining series.
Well, I certainly hope so. Let's cross my fingers for 2 Game 7s in the conference finals because the more hockey, the better. In the meantime, there are some other teams who are no longer in the playoffs who are potentially looking for a new coach. Some have already been hired. The carousel keeps turning, and we will talk about that coming up next. There's no I in team, but there is one in Indeed, and that's the hiring platform you need to build yours. When you're hiring, you need Indeed. Indeed is the hiring platform where you can attract, interview, and hire all in one place instead of spending hours on multiple job sites searching for candidates with the right skills. Indeed's a powerful hiring platform that can help you do it all. With Instant Match, over 80% of employers get quality candidates whose resume on Indeed matches their job description the moment they sponsor a job, according to Indeed Data US. One of the things I love about Indeed is that it makes the hiring all in one place easy because we get you one step closer to the hire by immediately matching you with quality candidates. Even better, Indeed's the only job site where you can only pay for applications that meet your must have requirements. Join the more than 3 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. Start hiring now with $75 sponsored job credit to upgrade your job post at indeed.com/locked on. Offer good for a limited time. Claim that $75 credit at indeed.com/locked on. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed. So the NHL coaching carousel continues to turn, and some of this has bled over into the GM position as well, with Don Wadell, the GM of the Carolina Hurricanes, taking an interview with the Columbus Blue Jackets, which, Waddell is on an expiring contract. So, he had to, but he still had to get permission to do so. I think it's really interesting that Waddell is looking to potentially leave.
I think it's interesting that Waddell, that the Hurricanes don't want to retain him at this point. The team has had so much success under his leadership, except they haven't been able to break that, playoff barrier and actually get to the Stanley Cup and win it. But, they missed the playoffs 9 straight years before he took over. And now, they've been winning divisions, they've been getting 100-point seasons, and they've been consistently a really, really, they've been a contender
Right.
under Waddell. And now all of a sudden, it looks like they're going to change direction now, whether it's the team not wanting him back or Waddell wanting to move on. That, we don't know at this time, but it looks like, his tenure in Carolina is likely to come to an end. And that's just a few days we find this out after Waddell signs Rod Brindamore to a new 5-year extension.
Yeah. The timing is really interesting, but I can see to some degree why it may be happening. We all know that ownership in Carolina is very specific and sometimes gets involved in player decisions like this. And, I think that maybe Waddell is just ready to move on and say, I don't want to deal with that anymore. I want an owner that I can work with and not be forced into signing certain players because that's the guy that Dundon wanted to sign, right?
That very well could be. And another part of it is also this. Uh the Hurricanes have a lot of free agents this offseason and not enough cap room to bring back a lot of these guys. It's almost like this year when they went and got Jake Gensel and went all in, it was sort of like a last gasp for this particular group, the way it's put together. And, maybe it's sort of time to turn the page, both for the team and for the GM. I can't blame Waddell based on the way that the ownership in Carolina operates for wanting to move on. And I have very little doubt if it's not Columbus, he will certainly find another home fairly quickly based on his resume so far.
Right. And it'll be interesting to see what he can do without that kind of ownership uh, that he's working for. So I think you could find success pretty much anywhere. So with the coaches, of course, we saw that Sheldon Keefe was hired by the New Jersey Devils this week. And I think that for me, I don't necessarily think it's a bad fit. I think he could do a good job there. I think there's some similarities to the Leafs, but I also was genuinely surprised that he took another NHL head coaching job that quickly without decompressing, without self-reflection for a while, without getting some media money for a little while. Like, I really expected him to take his time and not just jump out of the frying pan into the fire so quickly.
Yeah, I mean, I guess sometimes for some people, if you're a coach, you want to coach, and taking that year off and doing the media thing, or getting paid not to coach because you still have 2 years
Mhm.
left on your contract or whatever the term may be, doesn't sit well with them. And I guess the other part of it is, look, there's only 32 jobs out there for NHL hockey coach, and if you have an opportunity to grab one of them, including at a team that in theory is a young and up and coming team, you're going to want to try to take advantage of that opportunity and grab it. And I guess that's what happened here.
Yeah, I guess so, but, we'll see how this goes for the New Jersey Devils who have, like you said, a young core that needs to get molded into finding success, with some questionable goaltending, which sounds oddly familiar, Gil.
Slightly, yeah.
All right. For the LA Kings, they confirmed that Jim Hiller is no longer the interim coach. He is their head coach moving forward. And I think that it makes sense for them to do it given the turnaround that they had late in the season.
Yeah, I mean, he was able to help this team find itself and finish strong the way they did after a strong start, rough middle, but he was able to rally this team. I think it's the right move when you've got somebody who takes your roster and makes it better noticeably after taking over. You want to retain them, so I think this move made a lot of sense.
Yeah, I think so too. Of course, Rick Tocchet won the Jack Adams earlier this week, and I think well deserved. Obviously it's for the regular season, and I think Vancouver did an excellent job in these playoffs, and fought really hard as well. Nashville's Andrew Brunette came in second in the voting, and then Rick Bowness came in third in the voting for Winnipeg. He is retiring now, so that is part of one of the open jobs left right now. There's three in Winnipeg, Seattle, and San Jose at the moment, unless anybody else gets fired in the interim, which anything could happen, I guess. But it feels like the coaching carousel is spinning faster these days. That the time allotted for coaches to establish themselves and find success is shortening. But what do you think about that?
I think that's true. I think we're coming up. Look, you're in a situation where teams want to win and they want to win now. And even excuse me, even if the team is rebuilding, you at least want to see progress. And I mean, you mentioned San Jose being an opening. Nobody expected San Jose to make the playoffs this year, but the fact that you didn't see enough progress there made them want to say, okay, we've got to get a new voice in the locker room. So I think with all the money that players are making, with all the money that coaches are making, ownership is a little bit less patient right now with NHL coaches. And I get the feeling that trend will continue as we move forward.
Yeah, and you mentioned progress. Like, you have to make progress with your prospects and developing them. You have to be able to show that you can adjust. And I think that even if you don't come out with a W in a particular game, you have to show that you can wield the tools that you have to make your team the best it can be, regardless of how good that is in the grand scheme. And so I really think that there's like a 2-year cap right now on coaches, that even if a team isn't in, the winning column, isn't in the playoffs, if you can show progress, that's all that matters. And you
Right.
have 2 years max to do it.
Yeah. And I mean, I think if you go back to San Jose, that goal differential was probably the killer because it just showed a lack of progress, that this team was just bottoming out. And, I almost think that the coach's fate was sealed in the first month of the season when they were losing double digit games. Very hard to overcome that.
Yeah, I think so. We've got more to talk about and, maybe some potential candidates for these openings. And we will talk about that coming up next.
Today's episode is brought to you by your friends at FanDuel. It's winner take all time in the NBA and the NHL, and FanDuel's giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. And look, hockey fans, use your knowledge of the NHL on FanDuel. You've got both conference finals. You may want to pick who's going to win those series. You may want to bet on who's going to win the Stanley Cup, the Conn Smythe Trophy, certainly for playoff MVP. Lots of things to check out on FanDuel. Go there right now. Visit FanDuel.com/locked-on and make every playoff shot count. That's FanDuel.com/locked-on. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook.
So, continuing our conversation about the NHL coaching carousel, we've talked a little bit about the Sharks thus far. And they have spoken to some people already for that opening. Ontario Reign coach Marco Sturm, who used to play for the Sharks, is one of the candidates, and he is going to interview. They've talked to one of their assistant coaches, Jeff Blashill from the Detroit Red Wings history, Todd McClellan, who got fired by the Kings earlier this season. Getting fired by the Kings and moving up to San Jose would be a wild move, in my opinion.
Yeah, that is definitely a wild move. And they've been interviewing some people. I think Marco Sturm would be a very fascinating hire. I mean, as you mentioned, he has a history with the franchise, with
Mhm.
the LA Kings now. So there's sort of that Northern California, Southern California rivalry in addition. I mean, I think that would make sense on a certain level to go back to Sturm and have him take over. But I think the key with any coach that San Jose is going to hire, you got to look at someone who can work well with and develop young players.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. With Marco Sturm coaching the Reign, they lost to Coachella Valley in the playoffs in the AHL. Coachella Valley is a huge powerhouse
Yeah.
in the AHL, so I would not really put that as a ding on him uh, at all. I think doing as well as they did, it speaks highly of him as a coach. And the Reign have been a good team for quite some time, and I think he's been a huge part of that. So, I think it's a good fit, but it's not up to us. It's up
No.
to him in San Jose. I think the Winnipeg situation is interesting just because you've had a good coach retire, that it's not a situation where you have to make a wholesale move here. So, like, what is your take on this job opening, and what kind of coach do they need?
Yeah, the thing about Winnipeg, the team has done very, very well in recent years under Rick Bowness, and I think that's been, the success that they've had. You, they're not a big spending team necessarily, but I think they want to have a certain amount of continuity to be able to work with some of these veterans, and sort of the opposite situation of what you've got in San Jose. I would be looking for somebody who would be able to maintain the culture to a certain extent. to not make a drastic change. But, uh, a lot of people sort of questioning some of the candidates like Scott Arniel, who, some people seem
Hmm.
to say, oh, yeah, definitely go that way. And some people say, no, I think that would be a mistake. Uh, what do you think about Arniel and whether he would be a good fit?
Yeah, I think that he seems to be the leading candidate, and our good friend Harrison over at Locked On Winnipeg Jets seems to think that is high on the list as well. So I would not be surprised if that's where they go, but it seems like they are maybe holding him until after the playoffs are over and then seeing if there's anything or any assistance from the remaining teams in the playoffs that may be candidates they want to interview because I think that it would do them better to hold off and make sure they have vetted all potential candidates there.
Yeah, there's no need to rush unless, somebody else is trying to grab your number one candidate, in which case you want to, pounce and make sure you can secure his services. But yeah, at this point, if you're interested in one of the people working for one of the four teams remaining, patience is a virtue.
Yeah, and it feels like that's what the Kraken are doing because we haven't heard a ton about what's going on with the Kraken and their job search, but I feel like they've interviewed some people as is part of the general carousel that have been interviewed other places like McClellan. I think it'd be interesting if they promote Dan Bylsma back up to the NHL level from Coachella Valley, but I don't know. We'll see what happens there.
Yeah, I think he would be a good candidate. What kind of a coach? I still think Seattle is mostly a young team that, you need to build up. And I think for that reason, hiring someone with AHL or junior experience would make a lot of sense.
Yeah. Yeah. I think so. I just feel like hiring from within for them, especially given the success that Coachella Valley has had, is probably the right move for them at this point. I don't necessarily think that's always the right move to make, but I think in this case, it's probably a good shot. Plus, he has all that NHL experience to draw
Yes.
from.
Yeah. I mean, you have both someone who has NHL experience and who has experience working with younger players. So that's a win-win.
Yeah, I think so. But we'll see how the carousel continues to turn. In the meantime, of course, we have the continuing NHL playoffs. And Gil, you will be back on Monday to discuss the latest with teams and the hosts from around the Locked On NHL network. One of these teams hires a coach. You'll probably be talking to them, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right, that will do it for today's show. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube that's also available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering top sports stories of the day with local experts of Locked On, plus national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV channels app. Have a great weekend, everyone.